With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
The US has joined the offensive against Iran with strikes on nuclear facilities. Now Iran has vowed retaliation, while the international community is pushing to avert a wider conflagration in the area. Now here are the latest developments. EU foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels to discuss crisis in West Asia and Russia-Ukraine war, while German Foreign Minister Johann Vadeful said that Iran must negotiate directly with the United States. France Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has warned against any attempts to force regime change in Iran. The Israeli Defense Forces claim attacking 6 airports in Iran. According to the IDF, remotely piloted aircraft destroyed 15 Iranian fighter jets and helicopters as part of the strikes, with its recent attack on 6 Iranian regime airfields across western, eastern and central Iran. The IDF says it damaged runways, underground bunkers, a refueling plane and F-14, F-5 and AH-1 aircraft belonging to the Iranian regime. Earlier, Israel said that its fighter jets had struck dozens of targets across Iran, including a long-range missile site in the center of the country. Now, the Israeli army said in a statement posted on Telegram that approximately 20 fighter jets conducted intelligence-based strikes using over 30 munitions on sites across Iran. The targets included missile storage and launch infrastructure, radar and satellite systems used for aerial intel, and a surface-to-air missile launcher near Tehran. US President Donald Trump has brought up the possibility of regime change in Iran. Now, in a post on his social media platform, Truth Social, Trump wrote, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change?" Earlier, Vice President J.D. Vance had insisted the U.S. was not at war with Iran but with its nuclear program, while U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the U.S. was not looking for war in Iran.
No, we're not at war with Iran, John. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program, and I think the president took decisive action to destroy that program last night.
The world is bracing for Iran's response to the U.S. attacks. Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has vowed to keep up its punishment of Israel in a post on social media platform X. Now, these are Khamenei's first comments since U.S. bombings on Iranian nuclear sites. Ali Akbar Velayati, an advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has said that bases used by U.S. forces could be attacked in retaliation. He also added that any country in the region or elsewhere that is used by American forces to strike Iran will be considered a legitimate target for our armed forces. Now, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian also vowed that the United States would receive a response to the attacks. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department has issued a worldwide caution for Americans, saying the conflict in West Asia could put those traveling or living abroad at increased risk. The State Department security alerts said that there is the potential for demonstrations against United States citizens and the interests abroad, advising U.S. citizens worldwide to exercise increased caution. And to discuss things in greater detail, we are being joined by Jane Kinnenmont, Acting Director at the European Leadership Network. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.
Hello, good to be with you.
Jane, let's begin with your assessment of the situation in West Asia right now.
Things are highly uncertain now after this escalation over the weekend. For one thing, although Donald Trump said that the US had obliterated Iran's nuclear program, that's known not to be the case, and we now don't know where Iran has moved its stockpile of highly enriched uranium to. So just today, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the multilateral body that carries out the inspections of Iran's nuclear facilities and nuclear facilities around the world, has been calling for an urgent cessation of hostilities so that it can start to verify what has actually happened to that nuclear program, which is supposed to be at the core of this whole issue. Secondly, we have questions about whether the conflict will now widen and spread, and whether Iran is going to lash out against a wide range of American interests, or whether it's going to try to play things more carefully in the hope that it could still get some kind of accommodation with the US and Israel that would end the current fighting and keep the Iranian political system in place.
Right, Jane, we are getting two different versions of what actually happened at Fordo. Now, Iran has claimed that there was no irreversible damage at the Fordo nuclear site, while Trump is claiming that the US strikes have completely obliterated the nuclear facilities. Now, regardless of which version is closer to the ground reality, do you think that these strikes have fundamentally changed the nuclear equation?
They have, but the way in which they have done that is still unclear. I mean, the Iranians will know best how much damage has been done, but they also won't necessarily want to acknowledge that in a transparent way to the rest of the world, because it is in their interest, of course, to say that there was little damage. So again, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which knows more than anyone else outside the Iranian government about what is going on in that program, it is reiterating that there is still a lot that is unknown. But another uncertainty is what happens politically to Iran's strategy regarding its nuclear program. There's an internal debate in Iran. There are people who say, quietly of course, look, we have gone for the wrong strategy. We've made a lot of enemies. You know, we've taken too many risks, and this attempt to deter Israel from attacking us with our regional networks and our ambiguous nuclear program hasn't worked. There are others inside Iran who say we should have gone further, faster. We should have built a bomb already. If we were like Pakistan or North Korea, then we wouldn't be attacked. So one of the big unknowns is, will these attacks actually lead the Iranian government to pursue a more accommodating peacemaking approach? That would be nice. Or will they decide that what they need is to quietly build up a nuclear weapon? We have seen that before. Israel unilaterally attacked Iraq's nuclear program back in 1981, which was successful in setting back that program technically. But it seems that it also made Saddam Hussein more determined to build up a nuclear weapons program in the future. And we had many years of international engagement and conflict to try to deal with that problem. It wasn't solved by military action alone.
Absolutely, Jane. And right now, the biggest question is, how is Iran going to respond to these US strikes? Now, Iran has threatened to attack the US bases in the region in retaliation, and has also threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if Iran makes good on these claims, what are the chances of it spiraling into an all-out regional war, according to you?
The chances are high, and that may in fact lead Iran to be somewhat restrained. So far, it has not closed the Strait of Hormuz, although there does seem to be some disruption and jamming of signals there. They could potentially attack US bases in Iraq. It seems like Iraq is not very keen for the conflict to spread there. They could potentially attack US bases in the Gulf, but that would also alienate Gulf countries who have been trying to pursue better relations with Iran. There is also a risk of terrorist-type attacks sponsored by Iran against American or Israeli or Western interests globally, hence that travel advisory that you showed. But they may want to try to play things safe because they are, or as safe as you can in this kind of context, because they won't yet be sure whether the US wants a regime change. And if they can fend that off, then that will be the most important priority for them.
Absolutely. And Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, is now in Moscow seeking close consultations with President Putin. Now, and he's saying that Russia and Iran have common enemies and shared threats. Now, if this axis strengthens, are we looking at a relatively more symmetrical but also dangerous battlefield than what President Donald Trump might have bargained for?
Russia will also be looking at how it can extract the best possible advantage out of this situation. They are unlikely to want to confront America directly. They will be more interested in seeing this as a way to strike a blow to the US's reputation internationally. They will also want to preserve the Iranian government. So Putin has been someone who offered to mediate last week between Iran and Israel. He may still hope that he can use his ability to communicate directly with President Trump to try to de-escalate in a way that would leave the Iranian government intact.
Sure, and anti-war protests are also gaining steam in the United States, and Trump's legal authority to strike Iran is also under the scanner as we speak. Now, there's a growing perception that this is a war more about Israeli interest than it is about America's interest. Now, I'm curious to know, could this backfire on Trump?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a president who built his political career on saying that he was different from other presidents, and particularly for criticizing American military intervention overseas. He spoke out against the Iraq war, and he has long said that America is taking on too much internationally, including with its role in NATO. So people who voted for Trump definitely thought that he was somebody who would not get more entangled in overseas military intervention, and that he would be more focused on dealing with issues at home. And, you know, in the first few months of this year, Trump was talking up the prospects of diplomacy with Iran. So there's been this very sudden U-turn, and that is causing consternation among parts of Trump's base, asking whether the US will really benefit. Now, what that might do is reduce the chances that the US gets deeply involved in an ongoing war against Iran or a regime change war. But of course, wars don't always go to plan. I think that the US here has thought it can basically do one big strike against Iran's nuclear program, that it can then deter Iran from any major response and force Iran back to the negotiating table. Whether that gamble pays off really remains to be seen.
Absolutely, and the conflict that's brewing in West Asia, you've rightly pointed out, has far-reaching consequences, and we'll have to wait and see how the situation develops for that. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us.